Hello, welcome to the Boss It podcast with Mark Edwards and Michael Humblett. This podcast is released every week and is an over-the-shoulder look of a frank and candid discussion between two experienced software executives, providing you with useful tips, techniques, and the latest concepts to help you grow your software business in the fast-paced digital age. So let's get into it. Here is Mark Edwards and Michael Humblett.
Hello and welcome to Boss It podcast. And this week we've got another David. Last week we were talking to David Key and we were talking about stress for executives. So to keep the theme, I found another David, David Shieldhouse this time. David has been recruiting people for over 30 years, specifically in the software sector. And I thought I'd invite him along to have a chat about software salespeople, about recruiting, and about anything else that really comes up. So welcome, David.
Thank you very much, Mark. Great to be here with you.
Yeah. Well, let me give a bit of background. And I've got to confess to everybody, we've known each other for a few years. In fact, Boss Equity was originally named Document Boss, and we started the business together back in 1999.
We did, that's right. Gosh, it seems like yesterday. Well, it doesn't actually. It was quite a long time ago.
It was, wasn't it?
In reality, but it was a long time ago.
Whenever I talk about Document Boss, actually, I tend to think back to that jacuzzi. Do you remember the jacuzzi when we?
Oh, do we have to talk about that? People might misunderstand a bit. But you're going to have to say a little bit more now, not just leave it at
that. The day we spent in the jacuzzi together.
Exactly.
We're going to have to explain that one, aren't we?
Where was it? Well, it was actually I'm trying to remember the name of the place. It was just south of Los Angeles. We were at a conference. It was actually the AIM conference, which was the annual conference for the document content and business process management industry.
Yes.
And we were there, obviously doing business, talking to contacts, which was great fun. We stayed at this hotel, and we were in the process of creating the website, amongst many things. We were in the process of creating the website for Document Boss. And for some strange reason, you thought the best place to do that was in this jacuzzi, which actually worked out surprisingly well, because
it was an outside jacuzzi. I remember that, and it was quite a nice location. And I remember having a book where we were taking notes. And it became more than just the design for the website. It became really the strategy behind the business, wasn't it?
It did, yeah, the structure for the business and everything. And I can't remember exactly how long we were in there, but I think it was in the region of about 8 hours. And I do recall that we must have come out for breaks, because that would have been a little bit not quite right, really. But no, it's funny because it does stick in my mind, because it was literally a great opportunity, a great example of focus when you sit down in one place and you say, we're going to do this from start to finish, and the flow creatively was really good, and we were just very, very like prunes when we came out. But yeah, we did create a lot of the structure for the business and how it actually has been shaped for many years.
I know it sounds a bit odd to say that we created the business plan in a jacuzzi in the States, but I think that there was some good logic behind it, whether it was luck or design. I think if you're going to be creative, I think you do need to be in a relaxed state.
Oh yes,
that's something absolutely. I found. Whatever form of creativity you're trying to have in your own mind, you need to be relaxed. And
I think to be fair, at the time we didn't think we would be 8 hours. I think we thought we'd start the process for a couple of hours, and it just kept going. Really, yeah. It was, but that was good. It was good, yeah.
We came out like a couple of British prunes.
We did, yes, very wrinkled indeed.
But then after that, so you were with, as we were in those days, Document Boss for a number of years, and in those days we used to do recruitment. As we were moving into mergers and acquisitions. But then you decided that, I don't know if it was immediately, but then you got involved and you started a company called Zubka. Perhaps,
that's right.
Explain a bit about that.
So, I think it was what began the process here was that I was watching at around about 95, 96, 95. 2005, sorry. Yes. Apologies. 2005, 2006, I was watching a number of people that I had really looked up to in software getting into the internet industry and being very successful there. So in my mind was planted this thought that somehow all of my experience in recruitment and the internet should be joined together somehow, but I had absolutely no idea at that stage exactly how that was going to come together. And it was a little bit of a lightning moment. I remember where it was, actually. It was in a hotel in London. It was quite interesting. There was a massive storm, there was heavy rain, and there was thunder and lightning. And I was just sat in my hotel bed. I was in London, staying in London one night, and this came out of nowhere, the idea, which was, the recruitment industry is worth $500 billion a year, and why has nobody created a platform where a company could post a job and a bounty and have essentially the public refer their friends into jobs, therefore disintermediating the recruitment industry worth $500 billion. And I just sat there and let it sink in and thinking, well, this is bananas. I'm sure somebody must have thought of this. So, just as time went on, I started the business with Armando, a friend of mine, and we did a lot of research to make sure that we had something. And we launched with seed fund round, and then a few months afterwards got funding from Benchmark Capital, now called Balderton in the UK, the VCs behind eBay and some other great companies. And the rest was history. It was a great gig for 2-3 years.
So what did you do after that?
So after that, went back to headhunting, basically, because that's what I really enjoy doing.
Yes.
If I think about my focus, I've recruited for 30 years, but my focus really, 90% of what I've done is software sales. That's really been my focus. I mean, I've recruited CEOs, CTOs, all kinds of people in the software enterprise software industry, but it's really 80-90% of it has been sales. That's my passion. It's understanding, what makes a great sales rep in software, who they are. And most recently, I've been completely obsessed with the top 1%, actually, which we can talk about a little bit later if you want to. But that's my career really to date.
I mean, we've had many conversations about salespeople, about salespeople within the software tech, and I think that there has been quite a change. There's been both a change in attitude. There's probably also been a big change in the requirements from software people. What are the major changes that you've seen over the years? Because you've been involved for a long time.
To really put a point on that. Decades, actually.
Decades, yes.
Decades, yeah. That's a really, really good question, actually, because I know that there have been changes, and it's something that I haven't given a huge amount of thought to, what is different now to what it was 25 years ago. I can probably pick out one or two things that are very big, actually, that do spring to mind that I know are different.
Okay.
And that is that some things are still the same. So let's start with that. So it's still a people business.
Right.
So, if you're a really successful, I have a club now of the top 1%. We'll just touch on that for a second. And what's interesting to me is I look at the characteristics, patterns, traits that relate to, are there any patterns that prevail across the majority of these top 1%? And there are certain things. One is that it's still a people business. They really are just really good with people. They have what my sister, who's a clinical psychologist, would call EQ, emotional intelligence. So they're able to, no matter what happens, stoic is probably another word maybe. So regardless of what's happening in the outside world, the effects, the pressure of the job or whatever it is, they're just able to have this kind of humble confidence that, enables them to just be the person who the customer who's potentially buying their software needs them to be, to organize themselves in a certain way. But what's different, I would say, over the last 25 years is that the egotistical, huge ego, self-centric, shiny-suited, shiny-haired salesperson who maybe, in the 80s and 90s would just, turn up in his Ferrari and chuck his keys at the receptionist and say, I'm here. He or she may have been successul in those days because it was kind of a different era. The culture was different. We were in the era of, those kinds of movies. I forget which ones. You probably the one with Michael Douglas in Wall Street. So there was, there's quite a. I suppose at the time people looked up to gobby, egocentric salespeople and successful people. But actually, what we found in recent decades, if I can say that, is that actually successful people, really, the genuine ones, are ones that don't need to use the chats. They are the real deal.
Yes.
And they actually just, if I think about these guys in the top 1%, they take themselves, this is the best way of describing it, they take themselves out of the picture. Does that make sense? It's not about them, that it's the objective that they're trying to achieve for the customer. It becomes the star of the show. Yeah.
What impact do you think that the digital world has had? Because one of the things that we've mentioned many times on Boss It is about how marketing has changed. And I hear much more now discussed about top marketing people. I think when we first started with Document Boss, it was just all the conversation seemed to be just about where can I find the salespeople, where there's a bit more of a balance now. I think, and maybe that's just the perspective that I have, so that could be wrong. It seems to be that they realise that actually marketing and sales do need to go hand in hand, and because of the digital capability and the way to communicate, you've got so many different channels to your target markets.
Yeah.
The salespeople are coming much more towards the end of the process. I mean, they will go out and find somebody and take them right the way through the process, from I've never heard of you, I've never heard of that type of solution, right the way through the sale. But ideally, they're being given a flow of leads.
Yeah.
Have you seen that change? What have you seen?
Oh, yeah. I mean, actually, that's probably one of the areas that's changed the most over the last, and I wouldn't say over the last 20, 25 years, but just in the last 5 to 10 years max.
Exactly.
The roles.
Yes.
I mean, actually, the polar opposites were you had sales and you had marketing, and that was it. 20 years ago, 12 years ago, you just had sales and you just had marketing. And yeah, in some ways there was very often actually a bit of a divide. There was a little bit of almost like a competition for who's most important to the CEO. And that was bananas actually thinking back, because each party just didn't realize that they needed each other so badly actually in reality. So, and I'll tell you what I've seen now which is fantastic, because I think this just needed to happen, was that each of those roles, sales and marketing, have now splintered into many other roles. So let me just give you some examples. So on the marketing side, you've got the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, who sits above it all. And this isn't, but this is by no means all of the roles that exist in marketing, but you've got such roles now as growth hackers. These are people within the marketing department. Their pure role is to look at how to grow the community, how to grow the business using all their marketing skills. You've got social media specific people. It's purely their role to be on Twitter, to think about how to get the message out on YouTube and all the other channels that are out there. Then you've got digital content creators. If you look at something like Gary Vee, he's one of his most important people, and his rise to fame, and fame obviously has come with his VaynerMedia company being worth hundreds of millions now, is because he's able to create amazing digital content.
Yes.
Then you've got the people that are responsible for sending out, creating lead generation. So, I mean, these are just a handful of some of the roles in marketing now that exist. And then, of course, you've got the blue sky. How do we put an ad out? What message? What's the mission, vision, values, that sort of thing? That's a sort of a high level. So all of these things are within marketing, whereas actually before it was just a marketing person, really. But a lot of that's been brought about by the fact that, we didn't have the internet, 20 years ago, so there wasn't any need for these people. No. But then if you look in sales, just to answer your question there, that's now been split into lots of different areas. So you've got a BDR, you've got your business development rep, who's what we used to call telesales. Yeah. And that's become so much more sophisticated. In telesales used to be these poor people who'd pick up the phone. Hello, my name's Rob. I'd like to talk to you about XYZ software. That's been replaced now with a sophisticated, smart, intelligent person who is able to develop a relationship with somebody who somebody else in marketing has brought into. So it's completely dovetailed and feathered into marketing. There's no divide between the person in marketing who's brought that lead across, and then the BDR takes hold of it, and then that goes to an account manager. But no, that may go to, so when it becomes a proper lead, it'll probably go to a hunter salesperson in the company who picks it up as a coldish lead, turns it into a deal. And then that person, then the company will involve an account manager to develop the business, and then customer success to make sure that the customer never leaves. So it's fascinating. Yeah, it's all changed, to answer your question, hasn't it?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I think one of the things that I'm often saying to my clients is that I think that the digital age has had a big impact on that.
Definitely.
But I think also what it's done is it's created greater competition. And it means that you're competing with companies from all over the world. So if I was going to use actually a racing car analogy, because I know you like those. But
no, I'm laughing. No, but for the people that are listening, the reason I'm laughing is because Mark always laughs at me for using analogies. So I'm just taking the rare opportunity publicly. Anyway, carry on.
So I thought I won't use one. I think it's if you think of a football team that perhaps previously had been playing football within its own region, within a 10-mile radius.
Yes.
And it's at a level of a sort of an amateur semi-professional league. Now you can be competing with the very best teams in the world. And I think that as regards internal sales, and I've seen that, those, whatever title you want to put on those, there used to be the telesales, internal sales people, business development reps. You're right. Those companies, and we are very focused on the fastest growing software companies, the unicorns and these fast growth, smaller SMEs.
Yeah.
When we communicate with them, we can hear that there's a greater level of sophistication. It's not just bashing at you, trying to get you to commit to something. There's a greater level of sophistication, and it means that they've raised the bar. That they're just better at. It's creating a relationship.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think you used the right words there. That they've got very, very good at that. And one of the things I'm saying to my clients is, it's no longer good enough to be good enough. You have to be excellent. Right. You have to be excellent to get above the competition, because they're all good now. And that's the problem.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was just listening to, I listened to a podcast called SaaStr, which is the sort of industry for the SaaS industry. It's mainly founders, VCs and CEOs who are talking on this show. And
they're not bad. They learned quite a lot from Bossit.
Exactly. Yeah, they pick it all up from here, don't they?
They do.
But I mean, some of the companies that are on there, if you take companies like Zuora and Atlassian, there's some really amazing companies that have come up just in the last 2 or 3 years. I was talking to I won't name them, but I was talking to a security software company, the CEO, earlier last week, and he said when he joined them, he was the chief revenue officer, when he joined them in 2015, their revenue was 6 million. In 2016, they were around about 27. The year later, 2017, they're in the 60s, and they're going to do 100 million in revenue this year. And I just had to ask him, what do you put this down to? You have to give me some answers here. I want to know, how do you grow a business from 6 million to 100 million in 4 years? And that's organic growth. There's no acquisitions. And, obviously you had to summarize. We had a certain amount of time to talk. But apart from having an amazing product, which, you've got to have an amazing product which does exactly as it's supposed to do, a very defined audience where you're saying, this is what we do, and we do it really, really well. But he'd built a sales team. He has a sales team of about 100 now. But when he broke down what that was, there's 25 what he would call hunters who are going after, who are delivering 100 million. So they're doing on average 4 million ARR, which is twice the industry average, which is insane. It's really, really good. But around those people, he described, you've got account managers, customer success, business development reps, marketing. So he's just there's almost like a blueprint now for, what is the perfect shape for a sales team. Obviously, there's other ingredients, but in our day back in the day, software companies took a long time to grow.
Yes, absolutely.
To be fair, we didn't have the internet. So with the advent of the internet, you've got the opportunity to scale a little bit like Instagram, like B2C companies in a way. Whereas before, the only way to do it was just to keep adding successful reps and hope they sell more. But even then, software companies were taking 5-10 years to achieve what companies now are taking 3 years to achieve. It's wonderful. It's amazing to watch, isn't it?
It's an exciting place to be.
Definitely.
The audience that we're talking to, they're within the software tech sector, and we can say to them that you could have a small business today, and in 3 years' time, you could have a unicorn business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lots and lots of examples of businesses do that. There are lots of examples of businesses that go bust within a short period of time as well. But there are very few industries that can show the level of growth. And what's really interesting is that there's a number of the big investors that are focused in this area that have hit big a number of times. And when you hit big and you get a unicorn company, it means that you've got a lot of money to reinvest. And they're pretty smart now at being able, in the same way, that's what we're doing, is trying to spot what is it that makes this company grow really fast, really quickly, because the pace of business is so quick. You can't just learn from your own experience.
No,
that's
absolutely.
the issue, and you've got to be able to cut through the bullshit, because there's so much advice out there on YouTube. Is really go to where the people know what they're doing. They've proven they've got the success, because I get things thrown at me all the time. Experts. There seems to be experts everywhere you look.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that Tony Robbins said many years ago that stuck with me, and the guy talks a lot, right? So there's a lot to remember. But it's funny because, I used to listen to him a lot. I went along to one of his weekends. I went to two of them, actually, about 15, 20 years ago. But one of the things he said, which really stuck with me, was if you want to learn how to do something specific, a process really successfully, don't try and reinvent the wheel. Look at how somebody else has done it. Modeling. And replicate it, So if you look at software companies that have gone from, 1 to 2 million ARR to becoming unicorns within 3 to 4 years, the way to do it, and this is why I listen to podcasts and I try and look at these companies and figure out patterns, is because it isn't just, my expertise is in software sales, but it takes more than that. If you've got a crappy product trying to sell to the wrong audience, you can have great salespeople and it's just never going to go anywhere. So it is a combination of a number of things. But if you look at the companies that have really made it, what's interesting is I've just finished reading a book fairly recently. It's by Jason Lemkin and one of his colleagues. I can't remember the name of it now, but it's basically called From Impossible to Inevitable, which is an interesting title because what it basically says is when you start out with a SaaS company, very often the challenge is it looks impossible, but there comes a point where when you get a few things right, when you get to a certain level of revenue, and I don't know I can't remember exactly where that is. I think it's somewhere in the region of about 10 million ARR. If you've overcome those obstacles and you get to about 10 million ARR, it's inevitable. And that's really amazing. So you've gone from a point of this, how is this ever going to even get off the ground? How are we going to make our first few sales? How are we going to pay the rent and pay our staff this month? To you then get some investment, you get some sales, you start to get a little bit of traction, and then all of a sudden you get to in the region of 8 to 10 million ARR. There becomes this tipping point. Not quite sure exactly where it is, but they're saying, these experts are basically saying that you get to a certain point and it's inevitable because you've got to that level. You've proven a number of things. Number one, you can build a team that's got it that far. So you've got some kind of recipe for success there with a team. You've got a product that people are buying, so more people can buy it. So it's kind of saying you've baked the cake, now just scale. And that's where VCs get on board. That's why it becomes inevitable, because then VCs pile in and they say, well, I've had a number of customers that I've recruited for that have got to that stage. They've got to 8 to 10 million, and then a VC or two will come along and say, well, you've proven this now. We're going to put 30, 40 million in this and let's scale it to $100 million business. And then, of course, from there, the C rounds come in. They put in 100, 200, 300 million and it becomes a unicorn. So, it's fascinating stuff. It really is.
We'll put a reference to that book. So it's From Impossible to Inevitable by Jason.
No, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm walking with my microphone. I'm going to tell you what it is here. It's called From Impossible to Inevitable. Yep. And it's written by Jason Lemkin and, hang on, 2 seconds. No.
That would do.
I have to come back to it. Yeah.
People
anyway,
will find it.
Yeah, you can look it up.
We'll look it up, and we'll put it into the notes with the podcast that we do.
Yeah.
Somebody who does that. So no, that sounds an interesting book, and
it's an interesting read.
Makes a lot of sense. And I mean, one of the things that we're also saying is, from the perspective of building equity in a business and being able to unlock that equity, we've seen that there are owners and shareholders and founders who are very good at having ideas, turning those ideas into something really tangible, and creating a business and growing the business to a certain size.
Yeah.
What sometimes happens is that they love that success so much they can never let go of it, and they can actually end up trying to take that business to a place where they may not have the right set of skills, they may not actually enjoy that next stage. And I think they need to be looking to get some investors in and maybe step back and go and do it again.
There's some really good, there's some really good examples of that. Sorry to cut in. Yeah. So I was just going to say a couple of examples that come to mind. A really famous one, which everybody probably will know, is again another book worth reading, is The Google Story. I think that's actually what it's called.
Yep.
I mean, I read it 15 years ago. It's quite an old book now, but
yes.
Yeah, I mean, the story is you've got these two amazing guys who, extremely intelligent, came up with a cunning plan to essentially harness the internet and wring money out of it. That's probably the best way to actually, at a high level, to explain to a layperson. What did the Google boys do? They basically harnessed the internet and wrung money out of it. And what happened was, quite early on, once they'd proven the model, I can't remember which VC it was, but the story was that he was sitting on the steps with them, literally. Can we just picture this? Sitting on the steps outside the VC's office, and he said, "You've really got something here." And he handed them a check for $1 million there and then, because he knew if he got in early, he'd be really onto something. And then the next stage was, as they were scaling, this is where a really good VC is absolutely imperative, is because he was able to say to them, "You guys have got exactly what it has taken to get you to this point. And what I want you to continue to do is to use your amazing skills in being able to develop the product and the market and your vision. But this is now becoming a 30, 40, 50, 100-person company. You need a CEO." And the story goes something like this, that they were really reticent to actually hire a CEO. So what they did was, when they were forced to interview a bunch of people, they actually pretty much sabotaged each of those people's interviews, and they did it in quite I mean, people would come along and they just asked them questions that were impossible to answer. So, "Well, you're no good then. Next," it was a bit like that. but apparently, I think was it Eric Schmidt? I think that was his name. So the CEO, I don't know if he's still the CEO, but he was CEO for many years. He, when he came along, they immediately looked at each other and said, "We really like him because he's highly intelligent like us." Because these guys were just really, really highly intelligent. So they liked Eric because he wasn't just a fast-talking commercial guy. He was actually really intelligent. So they hired him, and of course the rest is history. And honestly, I don't think Google would be what it is today had they just tried to carry on running the business. The other example is LinkedIn. So Reid Hoffman started LinkedIn, and I was probably member number 200,000th in 2003. It was a very early business in those days, and Reid did a fantastic job building this social network effectively for business people, and it was growing. It was definitely growing. But at some stage, the VC said, "Reid, you've got just exactly the same story. You're brilliant at what you do," and he was just as good at the same things as the Google boys were. And the secret is to have the humility, like he did, to say, "You know what? You're right. I know what my skills are, and I know what my limitations are. So you want to go public with this company, it's going to take somebody who's done that before successfully." And then, of course, again, the rest is history. And didn't Microsoft recently buy LinkedIn? Have I got that right? Or anyway, no, I'm not sure.
Skype.
But Skype, that's right, yes. Yeah. But the thing is, it's, again, I very much doubt whether LinkedIn would be the business that it is today, with something like, 600 million users making literally billions. It's a multi-billion dollar business now, because he was able to make the right decision and step back and not be, I think the point you were trying to make is not to hold on, not to make it about you, but make it about the business.
And the thing that I hear most often is the business owners coming to me is, they feel guilty even talking to me about the likelihood of them letting go, when actually it's going to serve them, and it's going to serve the business, and it's going to serve the employees.
Yeah.
Because they're not the right people to take, and that's not in any way demeaning them in what they've achieved. They need to go and do it again, because we need more people out there doing that, taking ideas and creating some value from it. But there's a psychological link. They feel intrinsically linked to that business, and I can understand it. Yeah. But it was a few years ago when I saw this, and I thought, this is a common theme. People sometimes, they can almost be offended. I say to them, why did you start your business? And you can see by their change in their body language is that they say, well, actually, I had an idea, and I wanted to create some value, and I wanted to be able to give some security to my family.
Yeah.
But they get pulled down into the business. And I think that there shouldn't be that guilt. And often a change is as good as a rest, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I like you. I know the sort of founder CEO that you're talking about is somebody who is, I suppose the best way to put it in a negative way is makes fear-based decisions. In other words, this is my business, I'm not letting go of it. It's kind of like holding on too tight, so tight that you're strangling the very thing that, has the ability to, if you could just let go of that control a little bit, what you'd find is that the thing would flourish many, many more times than if you tried to hold on to it and strangle it to death.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at, I've made a study of who are the most successful multiple times entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, and actually they all have the same trait, which is that they can probably afford to. There is a tipping point there, because, like you said quite rightly, a lot of people start a business because, well, some people start a business because they think this is just something that really excites me and I want to do it.
Yes.
That's combined sometimes with, I want to do it because I want to build a financial security for my family. But there comes a point where these multiple times entrepreneurs have actually made it okay and done very well the first time. So then the fear level completely disappears, the control, because there's, well, whatever I do now, I'm going to invest, 20% of everything that I've made so far into the next thing. And then VCs will come on. And because it's me, because I've done it before, there is this tipping point that then says, I know VCs in San Francisco that when they see a certain entrepreneur, say, if he sits down with them and says, I'm starting a new thing, they literally won't even want to know what it is. They'll just say, we're backing you, because they know who it is. By the way, here's 20 million, and by the way, what are you doing? Because, it's not quite like that, but there are people who have been multiple times entrepreneurs, and because the exit time now is so much faster with some companies, it's sub 10 years in a lot of cases. It's typically, 3 to 10 years. Entrepreneurs can be successful numerous times over a period, can't they?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And the investors, very much, I think first and foremost, they have to look at the people behind that business. They have to have trust in them. And I think that's very, very important. I'm going to ask you a few quick questions, because believe it or not, we've gone 33 minutes.
Is that already? Time flies, doesn't it?
It does. I'm going to ask you a few quick questions just to finish off. We're going to go a little bit longer on this podcast, and hopefully people will excuse us, but we did get engrossed in the call. So one of the things that I've seen with software companies when you're talking to senior people is a frustration with the salespeople that they've recruited in the past. And there is a certain irony there in the fact that if they've had a series of people who haven't performed, you have to start to look at the person who recruited them. Ultimately, you say, well, you chose them. Nobody else.
That's right. The process.
Yes,
exactly,
that's right.
Yeah.
What are the common mistakes that you see with software owners, senior executives in choosing salespeople?
Mainly getting sucked in by somebody with some good chat. Now, when I say that, Yeah, I mean, that applies to a lot of things in people's personal lives sometimes, doesn't it? I mean, but really, that's the truth. I mean, I've seen situations where well-known, well-funded software companies with an HR team the size of a football team, which should be able to check things like this, have hired a sales guy who's just come across very, very credible, lots of experience, said all the right things, yes, but actually hasn't sold anything for the last 10 years, and that person has joined the company, and it's quite incredible to watch. So
we both know journeyman salespeople that we could probably name right now that have been in the industry for years and years, great at interviews, not so great in their sales success, but they seem to do quite well.
And you would think, so how can this happen? Because, you have situations where people take references. So surely if you take references, then this should be okay. There's a lot at play here, though, because what happens is by the time they get to the stage where they're taking references, which is always too late, in my opinion, I do it much earlier on. But when they get to the stage when they're taking references, they already want to hire this guy because they like him.
Yes.
So there is I can't remember what the term is, but there is actually a term that describes this. That they're not actually, even if they see things that might be a little bit concerning, they tend to overlook them when they shouldn't.
They've already made their mind up, so they've already made their mind up. Backs that decision.
Yeah, but that's not always the case, so you can forgive that. But even people that want to make sure that they do check these references properly, very often the references that are given are by people who are quite friendly with this individual. So it's what I'm trying to say is it's nobody's fault really. It's actually just it's a fault. It's a process that's just there's a fault in the whole process because you're dealing with somebody. Sales is a very subjective thing. It's not like if you're testing somebody's software development skills. There's websites like CoderPad. You can stick them on there, give them a few problems, and then look at how they've dealt with it. It's very easy to actually identify whether somebody's got the skills. If you want somebody to be a racing driver, you give them a car and say, right, go around the track, see how you do. Yes. And if they spin off on the first corner, it's like, next.
I knew you'd get a racing analogy in there.
I needed to get it in because you started and then you went on to football and you let me down. So, see, I was going to get it in.
You had to, didn't you?
So to answer your question, I mean, what we do now is we have this 1% club, top 1% club. We verify, and I don't know why it hasn't been done. We actually verify the sales, but it's not just with the top 1%. Actually, we're doing it with the top 5%. So very quickly, the top 1% are qualified by the fact that they've earned an average of $1 million, over $1 million in the last 3 years personal income. Now, you can say, yeah, but there's some great salespeople that haven't earned that because they're in the wrong company or the quota's a bit unfair or, there's lots of different reasons. I get that, and there's always exceptions. But if I look at the guys that are in my top 1% club, these are chaps that, guys and girls, there's actually 3 amazing women. Well, there's one in Paris, one in the Netherlands, one in the UK. They all have the same thing in common. They have emotional intelligence, EQ. They're completely and utterly obsessive about achieving. And we verify their numbers. We look at their commission statements. So we look at their tax documents. Obviously, we're confidential with those. But what I found is, this is amazing, is that what's easy to identify is if you ask somebody what their sales numbers have been in the last 3 years, if they take more than 5 seconds to come to the answer, in my opinion, then there's something wrong. The top salespeople, in my experience, that I don't even have to ask them. They want to tell you the numbers before you even ask for them.
Yes.
So when it comes to it, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think a lot of hirers, as you quite rightly say, in some ways have themselves to blame because if you just look at the sales record for the last 3 years, if there's any anomaly there, if somebody can have one bad year, I get that.
Yes.
You could go over the last 5 years just to give a little bit of perspective because somebody might have a couple of bad years and then have 3 good ones, but you'll be able to see a pattern. And if somebody's had worked for 5 companies in the last 5 years, again, we have a minimum there. So if somebody's worked at more than 2 companies in the last 6 years, again, a flag is raised. So these are metrics, they're undeniable.
I may be a bit controversial here, but I think also is if you aren't a top salesperson yourself, how easy is it to identify another?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's this is something that I realised a while ago is that without putting letters or numbers on it, A-lister hirers can hire A-lister salespeople because they can recognise them. If you're a B-lister chief revenue officer, you won't know. You might get to recognise an A-lister, but they won't necessarily want to come work for you. And the other thing is the type of company. So, for example, there are software companies I know who would love to get their hands on some of our top 1% club, but it's just not going to happen because there are certain metrics which determine whether one of these top 1% will want to work for a company like that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I know you've worked long and hard over quite a few years in pulling your 1%ers together. It might be worth having another chat on podcast at some stage because we've gone to 40 minutes, which is the longest one. The longest
People
one.
Are falling asleep now.
And I know it's the longest one that we've ever done. And Michael, when he comes back, he'll be telling me off. I can tell. I can hear him. I can hear him now.
Michael.
And I've got a glass of red wine waiting for me. That's probably starting to warm up a little bit now. So great to talk to you, as always, David. Too. And it's an interesting topic. I think it's something that we could have spoken about for a lot longer. And maybe we could do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Love to. Really good to speak to you, Mark.
All right. Super. Thanks very much, David. And thank you to all the listeners. This is the Boss It podcast. If you've liked what you've heard, then please do give us a like and share it. And if you haven't, come and tell me why. I'd also like to hear that as well. Thank you very much. Until next week. Goodbye.